was a group of folks got together from Utah, Wyoming, Colorado to talk about church camp. And I was in charge of convening and hosting this circle of people from 3 states. So I came to our circle of practice and said, how do I do this so that we generate all of the right ideas, all of the right energy, so it can then go to the decision makers? And I went back and reread my notes before coming this evening. And for me, the big reason for coming to this circle is that because the people in this circle didn't have a personal commitment or a personal connection with camps, it would be easier for us to talk about them. So rather than us sitting and weeping about my experience at La Forêt was the only experience I could ever have had that transformed my life, we were able to be a step removed. And that really helps. That emotional distance really helped. One of the things that I found that happens both in this circle and then when I got to the group in Denver and hosted that circle was the fabulous, amazing quantity of amazing ideas. And how easy it is for us to immediately step into problem-solving modes. Even if that's not really where we need to be, sometimes we need to be in a place of, let's just put the stories out there. And so one of the things that I did, and this surprised me that I got away with it, was when I started and was doing our circle, and I was walking around the circle doing introduction and explanation, and I said, everyone is here because you care about camping in the Rocky Mountain Conference. And I'll bet half of you have a 6-point plan in a 3-ring binder that you're ready to bring out and tell everyone. And what struck me as so interesting about that was the minute I said that, you could see a bunch of people almost physically put their binder away. They had come with their, here's my solution for what's camp, what we will do, and everything will be fine if you'll just do what I tell you. And when I named that, people were able to, it's almost like as soon as you say, hey, why are you walking with your shoulders hunched, you realize you've been doing it, you can bring them back down. And that was a very interesting thing for me to see. And it was something that really surprised me. The other thing that I found that changed for me was I was able to put down a lot of my anxiety about what came out of that circle. That rather than me being like, oh my God, we'll get the wrong answers, and then everyone will hate me, I'll never be able to go to church again because Aaron will throw holy water on me, whatever, I was able to put down that and able to put down that anxiety and be free from, as long as the process is sound, whatever comes out of it is what needs to come out. The circle itself was a very odd experience. Was for me incredibly exhausting because we started off the morning with just storytelling and then people sharing their stories, and then we went into World Cafe conversation with some very specific questions about what matters when you go to camp in the Rocky Mountain Conference. And what is it that matters about this experience? And it was very interesting to me how much people looked to me as if I knew the answers. And I kept having to say, no, it's your experience that matters. I want to know what you value. And I found that very unnerving from a community that within the church community, we claim to really, we're all about participation, but how often by default we look to whoever seems to be in charge. And I found that I'm still wrestling with that. I don't have a solution, and I don't have sort of resolution for me, but that was something that changed my perspective a little. The thing that I found interesting at the end of the day was the number of people. There were, I believe, 45 people who attended this particular circle in Denver. The number of people who came up to me at the end of the day and said, you have to give me a list of the books that I can go read so we can do this in my church. And if I'd had copies of the World Cafe, I could have made money. I could have made bank. So the other thing I've learned is that there's always an opportunity to make profits.
Just carry along an extra suitcase.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, the number of people who said to me, where do I learn how to do open space? Where do I learn how to do World Cafe? And I think there's a real hunger in a lot of communities for more participation, more circle. So, the other thing, and this is a learning for me that still I'm not sure how to integrate, is how do you do harvest at the end of a day-long conversation? So.
Can you say a little bit about what changed for you when you were going into that event compared to the end of the day when you were done?
By the end of the day, I wanted beer, and at the beginning of the day, I wanted caffeine. Actually, going in, one of my anxieties was that the folks who were the identified elected leaders had their behavior as we were going through the night before what was going to happen was very oriented towards command and control. People are going to show up tomorrow. We're going to tell them what to do. And I had to work with them for over an hour just to say, let that go. But I also, for me, going in, was like, okay, you need to let it go as well. At the end of the day, having just trusted the folks in the circle to do what they would do and to say what they would say, it was amazing to see what came out of that.
How big a group does it?
I think there was about 45 people there.
Wow, that's great.
And when we did open space, it was really interesting because I had come up with a list of things like, okay, here's some backup topics if we need open space. Not one of those topics on the list is something that people wanted to talk about. And it was really interesting to me because people were very passionate about the open space stuff, but the list of stuff that we thought would come up, how do we fund scholarships for camp? Nobody cared about that. What they cared about is how do you take a camp experience back to the local church so people get passionate.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's why you have camp. That's true.
Do you think part of the reason that perhaps some of the people were not able to say what kind of experience do you want to have when you are involved with the Rocky Mountain camp is that they're a little far removed from having experienced it themselves? I mean, as a youth, were all these mostly adults, or were they some of them young representatives or not? I don't know.
The youngest person there was 12.
Okay.
The oldest was in his 80s.
Okay.
But they'd all been to camp in the last 5 years. So like they'd done the adult camps as well as the youth camps.
Oh, okay. So there was some context
Yeah.
recent.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure how high up the administrative chain these 45 people were, whether or not they had been to camp as a participant, because that's probably some more relevant feedback.
I got hung up when you said you were going to have this group egalitarian kind of process, and then you were going to pass it on to the decision makers.
Mm-hmm.
What's that about?
As far as decision makers, that may be the wrong term, but the people who are actually in charge of planning camp and recruiting camp counselors. So the idea being that what's happened is that's happened in a bubble. You and I are now in charge of MAD camp, and you and I are gonna meet at a church and gonna plan a week of MAD camp. And what's happened is that it's been planned in isolation. And so the idea was, okay, you and I are in charge of MAD camp, but now we've got feedback from 45 people about what makes camp meaningful.